Hello, everyone. Welcome to Something to Talk About Live. My name is Liz Owen. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the Director of Communications at pflagnation.al. It is great to have you with us again this week for another episode of our show. So normally I am here each week live with my friend and colleague, Jean Marie Navetta, our Director of Learning and Inclusion. But I am very lonely in our broadcast room today because she is off at her very first in-person conference post-pandemic, which is amazing. And I'm very happy for her. I know she is very happy to be there. However, it's really important to us that we bring you a live and timely conversation. Yesterday, we launched a new campaign called Read with Love. I'm going to share there it is, pflag.org/readwithlove. You can learn more about it there. And it's really tied to PFLAG's efforts to lead with love. When you lead with love, you take actions that lead with the heart to support the people that you love. And we want to give kids credit. We want to empower them to do more critical thinking and to ask questions that help them make decisions for themselves. And that means including more books about all kinds of topics and people and histories in our schools and libraries. So we're inviting people to read with love with us. So yes, we are having another conversation today about books and book bans. It is a pre-recorded conversation with an absolute icon. So I'm really happy to be able to bring you that conversation that Jean Marie had earlier this week, and I'll let her tell you more about it. We really hope you enjoy it, and we will take your comments here live. Thanks so much.
Hey everybody, my name is Jean Marie Navetta and I am the Director of Learning and Inclusion at pflagnation.al, and every single week we get together to talk about something related to LGBTQ equality and inclusion. And this week I am beyond excited to be able to bring what I think is going to be a fascinating conversation to you. We have Kate Bornstein with us. She is the queer and pleasant danger that you have been looking for. And if you don't know who she is the person who you really actually have needed your whole life. So let me tell you a little bit about Kate before we bring her in. Kate, if you read her biography, it will tell you she was a New Jersey resident like me. She was assigned male, transitioned socially and physically to female, but in 1988, she gave up the idea of being a woman and now lives on the edge of a gender paradox. Not a man, not a woman. She's someone who looks beyond the gender binary to see gender as both a conscious practice and a playful journey. In addition to her fascinating existence, Kate has written some incredible books that have been translated into 5 languages and are being used in over 300 schools, colleges, and universities around the globe. And I just want to read the titles of her books because I think they really give you an introduction to Kate Bornstein. So, Gender Outlaw on Men, Women, and the Rest of Us, which is in its 2nd edition. My New Gender Workbook, a step-by-step guide to achieving world peace. Hello, Cruel World, 101 Alternatives to Suicide for Teens, Freaks, and Other Outlaws, which is the book that I think has saved my life more times than I can tell you. And finally, A Queer and Pleasant Danger, the true story of how a nice Jewish boy who joins the Church of Scientology and leaves 12 years later to become the lovely lady she is today. And so with that, I am really excited to welcome Kate Bornstein to the show.
Jean Marie, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Hello to everybody. Good to meet y'all.
We are so excited to have you here, Auntie Kate. And we have a whole lot of stuff to talk about because the world's kind of a bit of a mess at the moment. So, yeah, we've been talking about book bans and what is happening around that, especially in schools and how it's affecting youth. And honestly, you got banned before it was cool and trendy. You have been banned many, many times before this period. So as you look around, what do you think is going on with all these book bans? We've made so much progress and then all of a sudden, boom, here we are again. So what are you seeing?
The saying is everything old is new again. I grew up in the 1950s. And had anything like this come out, it would have been banned. It just wasn't coming out. So the sentiment is the same as it was in the 1950s. There's just, actually, it's a lot more positive today because there are people who are writing these books, and there weren't people who were writing these books back then. There were people who were thinking these thoughts. There always have been people who were thinking gay thoughts and trans thoughts and bi thoughts and queer thoughts. But writing them down and getting them published, and more than that, writing them down and getting them put up on a cloud where anybody could download them, it's a lot more positive today than people are focusing on. Yes, banned books is terrible. Pope Benedict and Pope Francis both banned my books some time ago, saying that postmodern gender theory is worse than an atom bomb. You go, okay, cool.
Proportion.
It says it would dismantle the idea that there are men and women. And I'm going, yeah, that's kind of the idea. I would say that now. I would say it would dismantle the idea that there are only men and women. Of course there are men and women, but there are many, many more.
Yeah.
So it looks like it's very, very bad with banned books, but here I go. Life always finds a way, and so will we.
It's interesting. I never really thought about the fact that there is so much out there is actually kind of a great sign. And I think you just kind of shifted my perspective on it. So I'm curious, because we've talked to a lot of writers who have found their books on these banned lists. We've talked to a couple that have been actually personally sued. When you have found that anything that you wrote has been banned or put on one of these lists, do you feel that it hurt you, or that maybe it actually increased the exposure for what you were writing?
Of course it hurts me. When I write, it's my heart, it's my mind, and someone says F you and shuts it down. Well, that initially hurts. You go, oh, ow, gee whiz. And I really wanted people to be able to read this. But the immediate next thought is, okay, how can I get around this? For example, in Africa, the continent, I spoke with a young woman who came here from Nigeria, trans woman, and explained to me that my book, my gender workbook, first edition, has been Xeroxed and is making its way around Africa in many, many copies. Life will find a way. Will it be difficult? Yeah. Might someone not be able to access it who could? Yeah. But I grew up okay, not being able to access anything that had not been written anyway. So I think we're okay in this.
As you know, I appreciate that you made the comment about, how you've been talking about gender, and this isn't about erasing anybody. This is in fact about acknowledging that there's a whole lot more than what many of us were originally taught. And we feel like that conversation's happening more and more. Like, you can look at polling and more people say, I know someone who's non-binary. I know someone who uses more expansive pronouns. It felt in many ways like we were very much on the right track when it came to making progress, particularly for our community and in these conversations around gender. And yet now we find ourselves at an incredibly polarizing time. I mean, what's going on? What happened? Do you think that this is just a very organized opposition, or were there a lot of signs we should have been paying attention to and maybe didn't see as we get to where we are right now? What's happening? And I know you say life will find a way, but some days it's feeling real dark out there.
All right. Again, let me emphasize nothing has changed on a level of people who are opposed to the idea of queer or LGBT. What has changed is that LGBTQ expression has exploded. LGBTQ words have been scattered all over the globe. But people who don't want that hasn't changed. That hasn't been addressed. And because that hasn't been addressed, these same people now have means to deal with all these words, to deal with people who are claiming I'm queer, I'm LGBT. So what is it about people who are demanding that there not be LGBTQ? I've been looking at this one, and I think it comes down, if I may, okay, I think it comes down to the truth of sexuality and gender. And when you ask someone, do they know the truth of sexuality and gender? Everybody says yes. Everybody. There's not a person in the world who doesn't know the truth of gender and sexuality. And of course, it's all different. So that means that there are arguable truths of sexuality and gender. That's a fact. Is there a truth of sexuality and gender that's inarguable, that you can't, you just have to accept it?
Right.
Yes, there is. And it's a nasty truth. It's a horrible truth. It's a truth that you can't work with. The only inarguable truth of gender and sexuality is that both of them are relative.
Yeah.
If you argue it, you prove it. Now, you can't use that in our day-to-day lives. That's not a truth you can work with. So we drop down to an arguable truth. And at that point we go, which arguable truths will end suffering for more people? And which arguable truths will create suffering for more people?
Yeah.
And that's what it really comes down to. And if we look at the arguable truth that is in place by the people who are putting in anti-gay bills and anti-trans bills, their arguable truth of gender is that gender is 2 and 2 only, and it's based in biology. And you go, okay, that's the truth. That is the truth. It's what I grew up with, and it's what most people have grown up with for the past, maybe, I don't know, 100,000 years. So it's a pretty well ingrained truth, and saying, "Wee, I'm not a man," it's not gonna take that away. No matter how well you explain it in a book of 700 pages, not going to take it away. Somehow we need to sit down at a table and go, yes, you're right. On some level, basically, biology has a big deal. Now even biology says there's more than two, because they're using science from mid-century at best, but really 19th century science. Now we know that for a fact, there are about 3% of people who are completely, definitely neither men nor women, but both.
Yeah.
We know that. And there are probably more factors that would increase that percentage that we aren't able to see yet. But intersex is a reality that no one has taken into account on the side of people who are banning things. All right. So people who believe that gender is 2 and 2 only, we can take a look at gender, have a piece of paper, draw a circle on it, cut it in half. That's their idea of gender. It's 2-dimensional. It's flat. It's on a piece of paper. Yeah. Okay. What has happened in the past 100 years, starting with early women's rights movement, women saying, I'm not going to be a woman the way you want me to, is imagination, desire, thought, intellect has entered the equation of gender. So it's become more than biology, it's become mind, and it's become heart. And those are factors of gender. And so instead of a flat circle on a piece of paper, we now have a sphere. And in that sphere, there's all these possibilities for what you can be and what you can't be. But the people who believe in the two-dimensional can't see the third dimension. And we have to be aware of that. And we have to reach out and go, okay, we understand that on one level, there are two sexes. Let's call them sexes.
Right.
What is the purpose of segregating them in each situation? And that's really what we need to get down to. That's not what's talking about. Well, all right, why do we need to segregate people?
Exactly. It's to keep an established order that doesn't work for everyone.
Right.
And it's, I think the fact that this conversation is happening, the fact that more people are talking about this, the fact that you could even look at mainstream polling and we're seeing more and more people say, yeah, I think there's a little bit more to gender than probably what I was told, I think is really exciting. But I think you're right. It's incredibly threatening to people who want to see the world in a certain way. And suddenly the world doesn't look that way anymore. And we're saying, and now look at all the evidence for it too. And that has to be scary. And I think it's hard to be compassionate some days when some of those people are being mean and doing cruel things. But at the same time, I always remind myself I'm very privileged to be exposed to conversations like this one. And not everyone gets that, unfortunately. And unfortunately, when we ban books and do some of the stuff that's happening, we shut down these important conversations, which is the deepest, saddest irony of the entire thing. You know, the article that we're using for this week's discussion talked a lot about, what was happening with banned books and that it's really not about books. But there was actually a line in the article that I really loved and I wanted to ask you about. So the author was Samantha Riedel. The article that we're using, it was on them. She wrote, when conservatives say pornography, they really mean any display of queer desire or joy. And that line hit me really hard because I thought this is not just about removing things that mention queer people. This is not just about, I think there is a horror at the fact that there are queer people who are thriving, who are writing about their experiences, different as they might be. And that's really intimidating. Do you think that in this sort of new way people see us, that your visual of the LGBTQ community isn't completely hinged on hate crimes and AIDS? Do you think the fact that we are expressing joy is part of what the problem is here?
Yes. Yeah, I think the author is completely right. If you look closely at why many people who believe that sex between anything other than opposite sex people is evil, it's by religious canon, and sex is not to be enjoyed by anyone anyway. Even a man and a woman, you're not supposed to enjoy this stuff, right? No, because Garden of Eden, it's all a punishment. You have to have sex because you're being punished. You go, oh, okay. And then here we are going, whee! That's a big slap in their face. Big slap in their face. And we're not taking the time to have a conversation about that. And we go, we have no intention of slapping your face. No, really. And fortunately, there are more and more people who are being ordained, who are part of the ministry, who are indeed queer and are taking on the task of introducing queer into religious canon. And there are more and more people who are claiming to be queer. I just read an article, 21% of all people in America today in Gen Z are LGBT, claim to be LGBTQ. I'm about 21%. Holy shit. That's like, go team. Sorry, I didn't want to say.
It's okay. I look at these numbers and I think it's, people always ask me the question. They're like, oh, is it that there is suddenly more of you? And I'm like, it's not that there are more of us. It's that we have the language to describe who we are. I mean, especially as we look at young people, there's so much less of an adherence to the labels that I think a lot of us in the past were stuck on. Do you think that this has been a real liberation movement, particularly for younger people?
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point about language. When I was growing up, there was no word. When I first heard the word transsexual, it was, oh my God. And I had to go to libraries to look it up. There was no internet. But yeah, this is a big moment of enlightenment for people. And yes, even though books are being banned, for example, they don't know about the book Hello, Cruel World. If they knew about it, they'd ban that one too. But shush, we're not going to tell them about that one.
Do you think that some of these positive portrayals that we are like seeing less of the tragic, deathly gay and more of sort of the happy queer? Do you think that is part of what is creating a flame in the opposition's belly, because they can't believe that not only are we bold enough to be out there, but we're also bold enough to be out there and not miserable? I keep thinking about the series It's a Sin that aired last year. And I thought, here are all these like very bold queer people in horrible, tragic situation. And I thought, what an interesting twist that it wasn't everybody just sitting around on death watch. There legit was joy there. So, Kate, one of the things that we often don't get into when we have this conversation, because we're so focused on other people, is some of the challenges inside of our community. And I think this conversation about, the offensiveness of queer joy to some outsiders is an interesting one. I also find it interesting that sometimes we encounter these same phobias and the same discomfort inside of queer spaces. I knew a lot of people who saw It's a Sin and were horrified that anyone was partying while there was a crisis going on. And I thought, you're missing the point here. So what do you see when you look at this? Is it an issue inside of our spaces for some people? Are we still grappling with not fitting into all the molds that have been given to us?
Sure we are, because this idea of seeing gender and sexuality as two and two only, and looking at that in two-dimensional and flat, is it this way or this way? Many people in our community go, no, there are only men and women, and you have to be a man or a woman. And if I'm gay, I have to be only attracted to men who have penises. And don't you tell me, if you don't have a penis, that you're on and on and on about that. And then you can't possibly have fun with all these different genders you're talking about and sexualities you're talking about. And you go, I'm offending you too. Just my joy and my existence is offending you. I'm not going to apologize for that, but I am going to try to engage you on what that means. And that's what we need to do. We haven't really engaged on that level. You brought up the excellent point that that's the center of the objection. You're having fun with this and you shouldn't be. All right, let's talk about that. Yeah, I'm having fun with this. Let's talk about what's wrong with that.
I wish we could have more of those conversations. I feel like we spend so much time in crisis mode. There often isn't space for that conversation, and we need to have it because it shows up all the time in the way that we treat each other and trying to pigeonhole people. And it breaks my heart because I look at it and I think we should know better than anyone what it feels like to be forced.
Yes, good.
And sometimes we don't. So, at PFLAG, we love fixing things and fixing people's wagons occasionally. I I would like to know what you think people should be doing now. I mean, we look at all these stories of all this negative stuff happening, all this legislation that is being designed to specifically hurt trans kids and to hurt queer kids, stuff that is certainly hurting grown-ups too. What do you think we need to do now? What does our activism look like? What are the conversations that we need to have? What would you tell people to do to go out there and save the world?
I've never been good at that.
I think you're very good at it.
I'm not an activist. People call me an activist. I'm not. I know that what changes the world is changing minds and changing hearts. In terms of what to do legally, what to do protest-wise, I don't know. How to engage, not too good at that. I'm good at expanding your vision, because there's one more dimension of sexuality and gender that really we haven't discussed very much. In addition to a two-dimensional idea of gender, flat, and a three-dimensional idea of gender, a sphere, there's a fourth dimension, and that's where does gender exist? Gender and sexuality both exist in space and time. And so rather than a sphere, it's a continuum. Gender is a continuum, and it's always changing. It changes on a mass level, it changes on a personal level. And to the degree we can accept that about ourselves and work on accepting that about ourselves, we can then help express that to others. And I think that's what I would say is the next step. The very fact that the idea of non-binary has entered mainstream blows my mind. Blows my mind. People are saying, no, it's more than either or. And you go, yay! So there's a lot of yay going on, you know? So that's the direction. Gender always changes. Sexuality always changes. Even yours, even the definition of it. And if we keep focused on that, and there's lots of ideas of it, this too shall pass. We keep that in mind and we change our minds and hearts. And that alone can change the hearts and minds of others.
I think that is some of the best advice ever, because it doesn't start with the legislation. It doesn't start with the big protest. It starts with that hearts and minds conversation, which sometimes is really difficult, but sometimes it's the most transformational thing that we have. And I think you've done such an amazing job giving us some of the language to have these conversations. I'm so very grateful to you. Thank you so much, Kate. This was one of the best conversations I think I have ever had, and it was such a treat. It was a dream come true. I told you I already fangirled behind the scenes. Thank you for everything that you're doing. I'm going to there should be a lot more yay in my life, in my head, because I think that's where this is. So thank you so much. And we hope that you'll come back and talk to us again.
PFLAG is doing such an amazing job, and you, Jean Marie, have a history of saving lives with your fine work. So it's been a pleasure, a great pleasure, speaking with you about this, and just keep opening your mind and your heart.
Thank you, Kate. I'm going to start crying. It's going to happen. It's eventually, there's going to be an eye makeup mess going on here. Thank you so much. Mwah. Well, that was quite a conversation. A little bit of a dream come true. I'm not going to lie to you. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I definitely hope you will check out some of Kate's books. So before we wrap up today, just a reminder that PFLAG is still on its mission to help everybody read with love. So we want you to visit pflag.org/readwithlove to get more information on our program, to donate books, to support libraries, and to make sure that inclusive publications and literature are everywhere for everyone. I told you that every single week I am going to be donating something as part of this movement. And so I decided that this week I will be doing 2 books, and they're both Kate's. So her autobiography, A Queer and Pleasant Danger, and Hello Cruel World, which was, as I said, the book that I think has saved me more times than I can count. So we have a fantastic conversation coming up again next week. So we hope that you will be here. As we say at the end of every single show, we remind you to do 3 really important things. The first is to run fast. The second is to laugh hard. And the third one is to be kind. And please get yourself vaccinated, get yourself boosted. Be careful out there. We are really hoping to see everybody in person sometime soon. My name is Jean Marie Navetta. If you need help, visit pflag.org. And until then, we will see you next week.